Hello, good evening, and welcome to another one of my 8 p.m. live streams. So, first of all, thank you all very much as you join. Usual routine, please. If you are joining from YouTube or from Facebook, then please make sure that you subscribe to my YouTube channel. It's important you do that. Get other people to subscribe to that. And if you're joining from Facebook, share it so people know that we are live. And it's been a big day. Well, every day is a big day at the moment, really, but it has been a big day here. So I wanted to, without further ado, introduce my special guest, very special, Fiona Marie Flanagan. Fiona, you're very welcome to the stream.
Thank you very much, David. We miss you on Twitter, but as you say, you have risen again.
I apparently so it is said. But I have to say, Fiona, it doesn't seem that long ago since we spoke, but so much has happened since we spoke. And first of all, thank you to all the people saying hello. Thank you all for being here with myself and Fiona. And yeah, Fiona, it's not that long ago, but there's so much has changed. And even since, in fairness, since this morning, woke up.
Well, yes.
It sounds like I'm going to sing a blues song. Woke up this morning, discovered that they've taken away my restaurants, they've taken away pubs, they've taken away, well, hairdressers. Not such a problem for me, Fiona, but problem for other people. The hairdressers are gone, the beauticians, the spas, the coffee shops. All going from I think it's Friday morning. So yes. So as I said earlier, it's quite funny actually in a way. In one way, you have to laugh at some of this madness. Here we are. You, a proud Irish patriot. Me, a pretty proud Brit, and we live on a Ireland which is united in slavery. Isn't it wonderful?
Oh, it's great. I mean, I'm streaming to you from my little cell that I can barely get out of. It's the truth. It's dystopian, David. It is absolutely crazy. And my heart goes out to you up in the north. We've been watching very carefully because our own Prime Minister Taoiseach will be making an announcement this evening, quite soon, as to what the reaction is going to be to the new restrictions being imposed in Northern Ireland, because it's quite likely that they will put increasing restrictions on the border counties to sort of synchronize with what's going on with you guys, which is just their way of imposing it on the full island, because that's where we're going. Make no mistake. I'll state my reputation, such as it is, on the fact we are going to be in full lockdown before long.
Yeah. Well, I think this is one of the reasons I was so keen to have you on tonight, because it seems to me that there's a kind of a lockstep going on actually around the world, but even on the island of Ireland. And basically, one of the things that happens is we all get consumed in our own little bubble. So I guess, a lot of people here in the stream, if they're in the UK, they're very focused on, what are the Scottish regulations? What's the English regs? And now for me, what's the Northern Irish regs? But Ireland is such an interesting one for me, because obviously, not least because I've got so many good friends living in the Irish Republic, but I also see I do follow what's going on, but maybe not everyone is. So, Fiona, maybe it would be interesting just to start off with, let's just talk through some of the stuff that's been going on with you guys as you kind of get into this deeper lockdown, whatever circuit breaker, I think, the new such a lovely euphemism, isn't it?
Listen, I'm fed up with these gimmicky buzzwords to try and give us the impression that it's only going to be short-lived.
Yeah.
Because remember, David, we were going to flatten the curve, and it was going to take us 4 days.
Yeah.
Do you remember that? We were all flattening that curve.
Yeah.
And now we're still there. Ireland has been a very bizarre situation, I have to say, and you're quite right to sort of single it out. I feel that the regulations here have been quite tough. Now, having said which, you get snapshots of what's going on in Britain in terms of aggression, in terms of, sort of police force, activity, and it does make you horrified. But let's not make any mistake. The same type of regime is going on here. We're at the stage where we were given hope. Okay, so we were locked down very, very drastically, and a lot of the police took it upon themselves to impose, border controls. I mean, I used to be stopped every time I went to the supermarket during the worst of the lockdown. Remember, sort of the April, May, June time. That was a very dark time for me anyway, and for Ireland, I would say. However, people were given hope. So just like yourselves, I guess, we came out into a sort of sunshine in the summer, sort of. We were never fully released. And the key thing was for me anyway, the most damning indictment of the Irish system is how our healthcare has been, to my view, destroyed right in front of us. We have consultations cancelled, delayed, put into the future. We are now we've reduced breast cancer screening to once every 3 years instead of once every 2. Our hospitals are, and I say this advisedly, virtually empty. Okay. Yes, our cases are going up, but we can talk about the case-demic very, very soon.
We need to talk about that. Yeah.
What's happening to us is that I think the last vestiges of our normality are being desperately clung to. We can't eat indoors in restaurants anymore. So I have taken the trouble to go into Dublin City the last couple of Saturdays because I felt to myself, this is the last chance I'll get.
Yeah.
And it breaks my heart when I see, restaurants desperately trying to have customers there with their outdoor dining. And it's getting cold, David, and then they're sitting there and they're trying their best to be normal, to enjoy themselves. I went into a hotel to try and use their restrooms, and it was the Westbury, and I was told, sorry, unless you're a resident, you cannot use the toilet. I said, go away. You're having me on. He said, no, I'm really sorry. It's nonsense, I know, but this is the way it is. So, we've got schools back, but I mean, I can give you lots of stories about parents who feel very, very aggrieved about what's going on and how the children are being treated. But I guess this is another universal thing. So we're poised in this situation where they did a smoke and mirrors sleight of hand to get us all at level 3, because originally, about a week and a half ago, we were all at different levels in different counties, because they had the cases going the way they wanted them. So they sort of faked conflict between our national health emergency group and the government. Anyway, the upshot of it was the whole country went on to level 3. So we are now simultaneously at the same level of lockdown, which puts, sorry.
Is level 3 the highest level, or is there a level?
Oh, no. Currently, there are 5 levels, 1 being the least restrictive and 5 being the most restrictive. And our chief medical officer, I believe, has even spoken about level 6, 7, 8, and 9. So you know what? Throw in a few curfews, throw in a few, let out once a week to get some food. I mean, goodness knows what's in store for us. And having looked at Australia, it fills me with dread. But I guess that's the idea, was to condition us. When you look at the Australian system, what happened in Victoria, to sort of.
I mean, I think it's such a shame that there's someone on the stream here, a good friend of the stream, Chris Davis, and Chris is a big fan of Dublin. And I see a couple of his comments. He says, "Get Dublin open for Christmas." I know Chris loves to go to Dublin. He loves being in Irish hospitality. The only problem is, I hate to say it to you, Chris, but Fiona, you tell me better. I don't believe Dublin or Ireland's going to be open for hospitality anytime soon. Certainly.
No. No, I don't believe, I agree with you. I believe we're heading into the most severe form of lockdown very, very soon. They're
Yeah.
just trying to sort of soften up the public and condition us with the psychological warfare and brainwashing to get us there. Now, Christmas, I had debated in my mind as to whether or not they might, like your hostage taker, they might give us a bit of reprieve for Christmas. Like you might be able to visit your mother or your granny, or you might be able to have like 7 people in your house as opposed to 6, or whatever they may do. But yes, I agree with you.
Because we in the UK, we've got this absolutely stupid rule of 6. Do you have the rule of, I mean, what is the scientific, because you're very good in this. One of the things I love about your whole sort of commentary on social media, because a lot of, I mean, Ireland produces some of the best voices, by the way, on COVID. The likes of Dave Cullen, your friend, the likes of Ivor Cummins. Ireland is absolutely got some of the top, very logical, coherent voices. But Fiona, where is the logic and scientific data for this rule of 6?
There is nothing. There's nothing, David, at all. In fact, I can say with some certainty that there is no robust scientific evidence in support of any of the lockdown measures. And that is the truth. And, in fact, there is even publications, coming out of Edinburgh University and elsewhere, very reputable academic institutions, which are now looking at the lockdowns around the world and saying that there is no verifiable, substantial evidence that COVID outcomes are in any way improved by lockdowns at all.
Well, see, Fiona, one of the things that if we go back to that sort of March, April, May, when Ireland and indeed the UK, so many of us were locked down. So we basically had a 3-month lockdown. And then, as you said, they let us out to enjoy a little bit of freedom. But they made us wear masks, which I want to talk to you about the masks in a minute. But then, now we've got this, well, we've been told it's a 4-week lockdown. And then at the end of 4 weeks, it's going to be okay. Surely, again, it's not coherent. If 3 months didn't do it, why would 3 or 4 weeks do it? So it doesn't make sense, does it?
No, I mean, and if you actually catch what your politicians and our politicians are saying, they're telling us that we're going to be in this permanent COVID world. I mean, some of them are even saying to 2025. I mean, my 16-year-old daughter has even copped on and said to me, Mom, they've got all this online stuff ready at school. How come they had all this prepped up? Because she asked me today about lockdowns, and I said, yes, expect to be locked down again. And she said, yeah, the school is ready for it. So I'm sorry, David, but all the organization, investment, time and effort to get yourself this COVID ready has all been put and sunk into the economy. So everyone knew that this was going to happen, because you don't just do this on a 3-week whim or a 4-week whim.
No, you don't. But then on the subject of the economy, I think the last time I looked, Irish unemployment had spiraled right up. I'm not sure what the most recent figure was, but surely what's happening right now in Ireland is going to increase that. And yet you had your Irish budget. The budget was it yesterday?
Yes.
I mean, so how does that all come together? Irish budget with I see a massive deficit, by the way, but what a surprise being forecast at the same time as Irish unemployment is going through the ceiling, at the same time as they're putting in measures which will cause more unemployment. Please, Fiona, make sense of that. What does that all mean?
Okay, all right. Well, let's just talk about the budget and the unemployment situation. Ireland is quite unique in the sense that, as you know, we're a very small, open economy. So we're very heavily reliant on our export sector, and particularly pharmaceuticals. Aided and abetted by our very accommodative corporation tax rate. So what has happened over the past few months here is you've almost got a 2-tier economy where most of the unemployment and the stress is concentrated in the hospitality, the tourism, retail, hotel, cultural, live entertainment sectors. Now, they tend to be, on the average, the lower income groups. So therefore, they aren't significant contributors to the tax take. government tax revenue in any particular year. So
Yep.
that's why up until now we've kind of been I'm not saying cruising, but we've been in a holding pattern, because the middle to higher income groups in Ireland have been sitting on their backsides working from home, generally holding on to their jobs or on some form of wage subsidy
Yep.
or furlough scheme. So in other words, they've been bribed. Okay, so the unemployment numbers, the ones that you've seen lately, would be in the region, I think, of possibly 15%.
Yeah,
I mean,
I've seen that. Yeah.
in and around there. Now, the worst forecast for this year was from the Central Bank of Ireland, and they actually forecast at worst we would hit 25% unemployment. But David, I say unto you, and I say this to your listeners here, the brunt of it hasn't even begun to be felt by the economy, because all of the other sectors that have been so far shielded are still not immune. And I happen to know that the banking, the financial sector, will be letting people go typically around Christmas time. So what you're going to see coming up to the end of the year and then into the new year, when all of, again, I said it before, but the government have kept the pandemic unemployment payment going and the wage subsidies going and the bribes going. I mean, the money has been flying to keep everybody quiet. And when that stops, you are going to see calamity across all sectors. Now, obviously, the ones that would be least vulnerable, I would suggest, would be, again, tech, pharmaceuticals, to a certain extent, financial services, although, you know, Ireland is moving from being originally considered a low-cost location for a lot of these global multinationals to being higher cost now. So what I said on one of my live streams with Rowan Croft was, beware sitting at home, because if you're sitting at home, all of a sudden, you're not missed in the office.
Right.
And all of a sudden, you're not going to be needed. I mean, this is the reality. So really, this story hasn't even begun to unfold in our labour market.
But I mean,
everything is suspended.
How would a country like Ireland operate with, let's say, an unemployment rate of 25%? Because that, I mean, I'm old enough to remember way back in the early 80s and stuff, when in the UK unemployment levels were going up into the sort of maybe 14-15%. But like that 2025, that's I can't really compute what that would do to a small economy, relatively small economy like Ireland. I mean,
it would have a hugely significant impact. I mean, obviously, it depends on the sectors in which that unemployment is concentrated and the skill sets of those unemployed and the extent to which they can reskill. I mean, your Chancellor of the Exchequer in Britain, what's his name?
Yeah. Rishi Sunak.
Rishi Sunak, though, hasn't he said that actually you're not going to get a job in the arts anymore, that you got to actually retrain tech up and become all artificial intelligence computer programmers? I mean, this is where it's going. So devastating is the word. I mean, I know it's very hyperbolic, but it's true. It really is true. We're going to have a structural problem in our economy as to how the skills are aligned with the industries that will actually survive going forward. And we know what they are, because we can look at the global picture and we can assess what are the strategic industries taking us forward, you know, into the Great Reset, if you wanted to even talk about that, and how Ireland matches up with that skills profile. And right now, it really doesn't. So it would be hugely problematic. I mean, we would have a massive unemployment, and everybody would then be just switched onto some sort of universal basic income scheme, which I think, you know, would be coming down the track. So all sectors of our economy are going to be hugely adversely affected. And the extent to which, now this is another plank of what I'm saying to you, Ireland can do this right now, and it can borrow this 20 billion that it says it's going to borrow. So that's 20 billion, rolling into 25 billion next year, as long as the financial markets are accommodative to Irish issued debt. So, you know, that is not always a given, because at least 50% of the money that the Irish sovereign borrows is from overseas investors.
Yep.
Or, banking sectors or whatever. So that is a huge risk. Now, I say this to you, David, the extent to which the EU the ECB and any funding mechanisms that they will put in place that Ireland may in the future benefit from. It hasn't really benefited from it significantly yet, but there may very well be conditionality attached to that. And that's one thing that I need to understand more, because it is my belief, I can't prove it categorically, that any country which has been supported by the World Bank COVID funding and loans into that economy, and they're typically developing countries. There's about 100 of the world's countries have had financing from the World Bank. There is conditionality attached to that, and the conditionality attached relates to lockdowns. This is what my understanding is, and again, I'm saying it's my understanding. I may be misunderstanding, so don't take me, full on. But we're hearing that this is what's going on.
One of the things that I'm sure many people on this stream and those many others who watch this Fiona on replay will wonder is, and if they've been to Ireland and they've traveled around, a lot of people have, not least myself. Ireland's famous for its hospitality. The Irish pubs are an integral part of Ireland. Tourism, especially from the States. Tourism is I would have thought was crucial to Ireland. But I was talking to someone else this morning, another Irish lady I know this morning, and she was telling me that, and is this right, that the wet pubs in Ireland have never really reopened. It's only been the pub that can serve is that right?
Yes, that is correct. That you got your €9 meal. Remember that, guys? That you can only go into a pub if you get served €9. And there was the whole thing about whether or not you could buy packets of crisps to take you to. I mean, the nonsense is it's just beyond ridiculous. And how anybody buys into this. But yes, back to your point, yes, the wet pubs have never really opened. Temple Bar will not recover from this. That's true. And myself, I belong to a group of renegades, and we discuss these issues, and we've been scratching our heads as to why the Vintners Association are putting up with this. Why on earth? And my only conclusion is they've been bought off. There have been bribes. That is I have no proof, but my only conclusion is when they know, because anybody now looking down, even 6 months into the future, some of our hotels are saying we won't be operational if we lock down come March. That's just it. We won't be able to keep going.
I mean, you mentioned the Westbury Hotel, which is a lovely hotel. And again, with others on the stream here, I'm very familiar. And I mean, I wonder what its occupancy rate is. I wonder, because who the hell would want to stay in a hotel where there's so many restrictions in terms of what you can do, and you've nowhere to go anyway? So, I mean, is this not killing Irish hotel industry across Ireland, not just in Dublin, but everywhere?
It's killing the lot, David, is the truth of it. It is killing our tourism and our hospitality industry. And, I cannot see a way out for them, because my view on the future, for what it's worth, is that this is a permanent COVID world. I don't see any get out of this. No vaccine or no amount of Bill Gates's wonderful shots of this magical COVID-19, whatever he's going to give us. It's not going to get us out of this. We're still going to have to mask up and socially distance. This is it. This is our lives. And the idea is that, Ireland has obviously taken a decision under pressure from, you can only imagine, World Health Organization, United Nations, EU, Axis. We could debate as to, where the power structure is really coming from. But I believe this is, I put up a tweet earlier on saying this second wave is really a bankruptcy phase. It's to force or to create the conditions for bankruptcy in these sectors, the sort of hospitality, tourism. I've said that. That's because that's the only way I can reason this to myself.
Well, you see, I agree so much with you, Fiona, because, for example, we've had our Chancellor, Rishi Sunak, catchy name, but actually a pretty intelligent, savvy guy. Smart
Hugely
guy.
intelligent.
Yeah,
Yeah.
to be fair to him, I think he's got a bit of an economics background as well. So a good guy. But
Is he London School of Economics? Is he LSE?
no, I'm not sure about that. But I do know he married. He's married to a multi-millionairess. So top marks for that.
So he's fine then. He can buy his way out of this problem.
Yeah. But going back to simple stuff, because I like to bring things right down. He's talking about the fact that, oh well, look, we are forcing parts of the UK economy to close down, just like in Ireland. But it's okay because we got this scheme which will pay people in the UK anyway roughly 2/3 of their wage. So yeah, it's all okay. Now, anyone who understands business, as he does, must realize that that's a nonsense, because business doesn't exist just to pay the wages. It exists to make a profit, to be able to sustain itself and to exist in the future. But when you close a business, that's it. Profit reduces to zero. Doesn't matter what you're paying your staff or otherwise. Profits at a zero. So these are the things I think, Fiona, that so many people, when you start to think about it, you think doesn't make sense. It's cognitive dissonance, isn't it? Really,
totally. Yeah.
Yeah, yes. And I think many people who were maybe not just as woke as we were back in March, April, are coming around to the fact that fundamentally they just look at it and go, it doesn't make sense. And maybe is there hope in that? The fact that they're recognizing that something's not right here, something's odd, or is it too late?
Oh, I don't want to be too negative on you. In Ireland, Ireland, again, I feel bad saying this, but we are particularly brainwashed, David. Relative to the rest of the world, our little group of resistors, if you want to call us that, or dissidents or whatever, to me is relatively small. I would have hoped for a greater awakening in Ireland than I'm seeing. Now, this is just my impression. I could very well be wrong, but the extent of the compliance that I see around me in my day-to-day activities is absolutely astonishing. And like I said, explaining the two-tier economy, those who are the higher income earners, Irish Times readers, very, establishment type people, would believe this and think themselves virtuous and doing the right thing. The trouble is there are way too many of those, and our public sector, I think, accounts for about 8% of our labour force, or at least the employed. So they're all right. Let's be honest, no disrespect to any teachers listening in, but on the most part, the teachers are quite happy to go home on full pay. Wouldn't they be? Just think about it. And especially the lecturers, having been one myself, I can tell you, if you had said to me, actually, you've got to sit in your backside in your study, do a couple of live streams every week, we'll tape your lectures, and you don't have to deal with the students, happy days. So everybody will be sitting, looking myopically, maximizing their own utility, but they won't be, I don't believe, and again, I sound very disrespectful of people, but I just don't think they're looking at the big picture, David, like you are. You're explaining, going forward, looking at how the economy actually works.
I think essentially you've touched on a very interesting point, because it's a Brexit point as well. It's my observation that some of the most educated people, those who have, the middle class, who have got their degrees and their postgrads and all of that, they're the most brainwashed. They were the people most in love with the EU, who couldn't understand that the ordinary working class Brit might just want to get the hell out of it. And by the same token, I think now it's kind of the same over COVID. The most compliant, the most COVID enthusiastic are the most educated, which breaks my heart. At one level, but then, well, it was the same over Brexit, and it's the same over COVID and the public sector. And by the way, if it's 8% in the Irish Republic, here in the North, we have, I think, a public sector in the region of, I think it's because it's always been a bugbear of mine, 25-30%. It's
Yeah,
mad.
I
It's
thought that.
mad. Yeah. So basically, lockdown was happy. It was happy days. Everyone was off on a jolly for 3 months and paid full wages, no issues. What's not to love about that? But countries can't operate like that indefinitely, can they?
No, of course they can't, and not without major shocks. I mean, I feel like I'm a broken record about this. It's almost like, because I do recall a conversation years ago before the financial crisis of 2008, and I was having a conversation with a gentleman, and this was in relation to the Irish situation, and he was saying to me, "Oh, but it doesn't matter because everyone who's here from abroad will just get on the plane and go back. So the Irish economy will be absolutely fine." And I said, no, it doesn't work like that. You can't just, So I feel and again, no disrespect, but I feel that people just aren't working their way through this and trying to understand. Yeah, teachers did have a great look. One of my best friends is a teacher, and she was explaining to me that she enjoyed the lockdown because it got her, she had time to think, relax, and, focus on other aspects of her life, and that did give people that opportunity. So to the extent that the first lockdown was, almost justifiable, not in my view, but to other people, I can almost get it. But moving forward like this, I just cannot understand how people cannot compute that you can't shut down the world and expect things to ever get back to the way they were.
There was a story I saw the other day, Fiona. I'm sure you're well aware of it, but it shocked me. And it was the Irish travel list, the country, those destinations you can fly out of Ireland to visit. The green list was zero. There was nobody on. There was no country on the Irish green list. I don't know if you saw that the other day, but it stopped me in my tracks because I thought, "What is it? The Irish government actually have got you. You're actually all imprisoned."
Yeah, they don't want us going anywhere, and that they're talking about fining us if we leave the country. Like, are you listening to this? At one point through the summer, it occurred to me that a lot of repatriation was going on from countries in the Middle East, of which I am reasonably familiar. And I thought to myself, gosh, is it a thing that countries do want as many people as they can back in place so that when they bolt them down in this next phase of lockdown, they are in situ and therefore more easily controllable? Because the last thing they want is for people coming in and out. And it's not because of COVID, because they would have shut the borders right at the beginning of this pandemic had they actually been concerned about virus transmission. But they didn't. They kept them wide open. Remember, flights were coming in and out all the time, and it wasn't until duress that the Irish government started to in any way restrict flights out of here. So yes, we're essentially trapped. I mean, we could go, obviously, but
Yeah, but it's a really good point, though. And as I say, it's something that I think viewers should really think about, because I suspect we will follow in that tradition as well of essentially ensuring that nobody leaves. I was speaking to a friend this morning who had flown from Belfast to Edinburgh Airport, and they were saying that Belfast was quite reasonably busy, but it's a small airport. They went to Edinburgh, and there's nobody there. There was nobody there. It was the airport. It was a ghost airport. Now, of course, Nicola Sturgeon is leading the UK charge. Commissar Sturgeon is for sure. I mean, she shut down 3.5 million Scots from in a lockdown, which has now only been exceeded by our wonderful people at Stormont. So again, airports can't continue to function, can they?
No. What we are going to see, unfortunately, is a major restructuring of all industries. The airline industry will be no exception. And again, I wondered about, our Michael O'Leary. Oh, bless him. Our favorite airline owner. But when he took the government to court over the restrictions, it appeared to me that he backed down just that little bit too easily. He kind of went out and challenged them, and the government came back with some mealy mouth. Well, there weren't really legal requirements. There were only rules.
Mm.
Ah, sure, and
Yeah,
that was the
yeah.
end of that. So I wondered again, me being the cynic that I am, I wondered what sort of dirty deals have been done there. Because I was having an argument with someone as to whether or not Ryanair would actually make it through this pandemic.
Mhm,
Because remember, I'm looking at this pandemic as a 5-year time horizon. At the
mhm.
very least, because I know that the United Nations has a sort of a deadline for deliverables in 2025.
Yeah.
So I look upon this as part of this phased delivery system. So yes, David, what you say is that the airline industry, as we know it, cannot survive.
Mm,
And
mm.
the airlines that do, I feel, will be the ones that are strategically picked by governments in
Yeah.
tandem with multinational corporations to survive. And you may get one or two per region. I don't know. For example, I think Emirates is
Mm,
a good candidate to hang on. Don't
mhm,
ask me why, I just feel it is. But in
mm.
Europe, I really don't know which will end up.
But I mean, I wonder what it's like down in Dublin, the Dublin airport, which, with the big, very impressive new terminal that was opened there about 10 years ago or whatever. And every time I've been through Dublin airport, it always has been bustling. It's even
Aussie.
hard to
Yeah.
get car parking space. It's got to be pretty quiet these days, hasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I was out around the airport a few weeks ago and it was really, really quiet. So yes, I mean,
Mm.
I'm not saying that there aren't, people moving in and out.
No,
There
no,
would
no.
be a certain number of people doing that, notwithstanding the restrictions. But yeah, we just don't have normal activity in any way, shape, or form. I mean, it's.
I know it's weird. Let's talk about cases, and let's talk about mortality, because at the heart of this, the narrative goes that we've got this terrible pandemic, this awful virus, which was really bad earlier in the year, and now it's come back, and we've got a second wave, and because of that, that's why we have to lock down. And in the UK, we have seen this, what I think most people would recognize as a case demic. We've seen
Yeah.
cases go right like that there. And mortality levels remain pretty much stubbornly low. Obviously, every death is sad, but in life you have death. We cannot live in a death. Life includes death. But has that been the same in Ireland? Have you had the big increase in cases? And what's the mortality picture been like in Ireland?
The mortality rate, thankfully, thank God for this, has been reasonably flat over the summer. We had the real sort of the spike,
Yeah.
as we would with any pandemic. It's the Gompertz curve, as you probably heard
Yeah.
Ivor Cummins speak about so
Yeah.
eloquently. And then it sort of tapered on and flatlined. So we have 5 deaths. Okay, so, may they all rest in peace. But, and again, I sound awful saying this, but I must caveat that when they reported the death numbers for August,
Mhm.
the official data were quite low. Okay, so I made the remark that perhaps those deaths they haven't come through to the official statistics, and therefore they are carried forward into September and October. Now, I happen to know Fergal Bowers, who's the RTE correspondent for Death. Um, he acknowledged in on one of the days that I think a couple of the deaths, I can't get the figures exactly right, but were carried forward from the August data that hadn't been recorded. So they were underreported in August, and therefore they're going to be overreported into the autumn. So I am not saying that these people didn't die of, with COVID, whether it was of or with, the same questions remain. We still don't know. Every death is a tragedy, of course. But, we've got to understand, I've just got this graph here in front of me, that in terms of averages, deaths in Ireland per 1,000 in 2020, it's below the average for the past 5 years.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah, yeah.
So,
It is remarkable, Fiona. I've seen that. I've looked at that, and
yeah.
it's almost incredible that I haven't totted them all up, but if you do look at Ireland from January until, I think, does it go up to September? The number. Oh, I think it's only March or April. There's only a couple of months where it
Yes.
goes up slightly.
Yes.
Yeah. But that doesn't look to me like a pandemic exactly, because
No.
I expect it to be so, so significant that there would be no debate about it. But
No.
what's the position in the Irish hospitals then? Because we're being told, there's some truth in this. Well, look, the intensive care units are being overrun by COVID patients. Now, I did have last night on the stream Rebecca Butler, my friend, whose daughter works in one of the COVID wards in Sheffield in England, and I do understand. I completely accept what she said, that her daughter says that ward is full with COVID patients. So that's fine. But what's it like in Ireland? Or are your hospitals overflowing with the
No. I mean, we have I'm just looking at live data here. 30 confirmed cases in ICU, 1 admission in the last 24 hours, and 2 discharges. So by any measure, now, as I say, I'm not diminishing these people. Please don't misunderstand us. But we're trying to put it into the context of we're moving into a winter flu season, of course. We have a lot of vulnerable elderly. So, in terms of raising alarm and whether the hospitals are over capacity, no, absolutely not. We just don't have that. Another warning that, the same sort of warning that's going out in the UK, about the Nightingale hospitals, they're talking about setting up, half of me thinks, how are they going to fill them? Or are they just going to confound normal flu fatalities in any one particular year with COVID? I mean, this sounds a very horrible, sort of macabre question to ask you, but how are they going to harvest the fatalities for COVID if they're not, materializing to the level that would justify this panic?
Yeah, well, I think the thing, Fiona, this is where trust has been lost. I think that, and this is where I blame the political class and the media class, the way they've carried on for the last 6 months, and also the medical class, the manipulation, the confusion, the contortions, means that none of us really can be confident. Whenever I hear a stat that says, today we had 34 people admitted to hospital, or we've had 1,000 new cases, these stats, I'm afraid I just raise an eyebrow and think, okay, so you had 1,000 people with positive cases. But we all know about the positive, false positive, which, by the way, here in the Northern Ireland, they refuse to actually tell us what the false positive percentage is. I wonder why that might be. Yeah.
They will not even talk about it. They won't even.
They won't talk.
Oh my goodness. So you guys are completely brainwashed into actually thinking a case is a direct infection, an active infection.
Yes. That's how bad it is. Yeah. And the media, the media, Fiona, plays such a key role. They parroted for the last couple of weeks. I've been banging on about on online. I've been on about this. It's so important that journalists actually ask the authorities, please share with us what is the false positives. Because as you know, it's only when we get the false positives and apply that to the total number of cases that we can actually say, well, the number of total positives then might actually net out 0. Who knows?
In some cases you could argue that.
Yeah, absolutely. But not when they tell. There was a slip of the. I'll give you a laugh. You'll enjoy this one. And the media, as I said, the authorities have completely ignored it, and the media don't want to talk about it here. And in the UK, generally, Matt Hancock, the health secretary, he doesn't understand it. It's sad. He doesn't understand. He thinks, the false positives. That's the number of positives that were wrong. No, it's not. It's a total number of cases, PCR cases that have tested false. But the chief medical, the health secretary here in Northern Ireland, who's a sheep farmer. No disrespect to sheep farmers, but I'm not sure that sheep farmer is necessarily the ideal qualification for a health secretary. I could be wrong. But anyway, some journalist asked a question, and the chief medical officer who stands beside, they've got these like henchmen standing beside them, which I think is quite actually sinister. He's the chief medical officer started to talk about false positives in a moment of revelation, and he said, "Yeah, the false positive. We have to be." He said, "We have to be careful about the PCR test because it does. There's errors can happen." And he put it, quote unquote, about 25 to 30% of all cases are false. So not the 0.8 to 4%, which the UK government has said, but he said 25 to 30%. Not one journalist in the room picked up on it. The only person who talked about it a bit was me, and I'm not in the room. So, and I guess it must be, is it the same in Ireland? Is false positives understood? Is there a percentage figure that people kind of understand? How does it work?
It's sort of well, to be honest, we have this Professor Luke O'Neill, who isn't financially associated with any pharmaceutical company at all. If you get my gist, completely sure. No conflict of interest with Luke O'Neill. He's absolutely independent, David. Totally independent, completely trustworthy. Didn't sell his company for 230 million to a pharmaceutical company recently. Eye-watering. Nothing to see here at all. Anyway, he did kind of you see, I think they fess up very, in a small part of the media, they fess up, but that's it. Then they feel exonerated. So he did say that the PCR test is very sensitive, and it's not really, ideal, and that really we should be looking for another way of detecting these cases. But, well, sure, we can go on. So, yes, it has been admitted, and I need to get this right for you, but we have a NEFIT, which is our National Public Health Emergency Team, and we have a gentleman called Dr. Cillian de Gascon. And he went to the trouble of tweeting a very long thread about the PCR test, the usual blurb, talking about sensitivity and talking about amplification cycles, but nothing firm. He was going, well, typically and usually, these kind of vague words that can't be pinned down. But then somebody sent me, under the Freedom of Information Act, they obtained from the Health Service Executive confirmation that 40 to 45 amplification cycles are used. So even ignoring the sensitivity issue, the number of cycles being used is very, very suggestive of a huge or a highly significant false positive rate. I mean, we're talking about, to be honest, I mean, the way you can kind of look at it is we may only have between 0 to 10% of genuine cases in amongst all that noise and all that error and all of that diagnostic,
It's remarkable because that 45,000 amplifications, I know this is a bit scientific, but it's still interesting. It should be, I think, it's recommended. It should be single digits. It shouldn't be that. So if you amplify it, if you do it that way, you're gonna find something, no matter how minuscule.
Well, didn't Kerry Mullis, the inventor, say you can find anything on anyone at any time? Or words to that effect. It does not differentiate between live virus and non-infectious fragments of RNA that are hanging around your system from, the last flu you may have had or the last common cold you may have had. I mean, this is the reality. It's shocking. It is a hoax of monumental proportions.
Well, one of the saddest things I saw is, I mean, the reality is that this spreads an awful lot of fear. And I saw a video clip today on social media, and it was a lady leaving. It was in Ireland, and she was leaving a supermarket, and she was talking to the camera. Don't know if you saw it. And it broke my heart because she'd met an elderly gent. She wasn't wearing a mask. She was one of the heretics. I've never worn a mask, Fiona. I won't be wearing a mask. Never happened. But I'm sure you saw the thing then. I mean, it was not so sad. So she'd met this elderly gentleman, and he said he liked to go to the shops, as so many elderly people do, to meet other people and see them smile and just just a bit of life, and that had been taken from him. And it upset her, it upset me. I'm sure it upset you as well. It was
Yeah,
awful.
I mean, it's heartbreaking what's happening. These are dehumanizing, inhumane policies that are being implemented here. I mean, even for me, in my meager existence, I used to love, I don't know about you, David, but I used to love going to my coffee shop, having a coffee, sitting down, reading, whatever, and just watching the world go by, or meeting a friend. It's these small little, simple little interactions that we are being denied now.
Well, actually, that then, Fiona, brings us then towards the last 10 minutes, because Chris asked a really good question, and we should tackle it. Okay, so we understand where we are exactly. What's the end game? How if this was a movie, Fiona, well, what's going to happen in the last half hour? Because up until this point, it's a pretty crap movie, right? But we got
a horror story.
Movie. Yeah, it's an absolute hammer horror. But how do you think then this one is going to go? Because you mentioned the UN 2025. We have talked. We didn't really talk about the World Economic Forum, but folks, the World Economic Forum. It's not a conspiracy theory. It's there. Just Google it. So someone said to me, Fiona, if you want to check up the Great Reset, don't worry about conspiracy theories. Just YouTube it and Google it, and up at the top of the stream comes the World Economic Forum. I saw something that really annoyed me last week. I saw Prince Charles. He's actually very keen in pushing the World Economic Forum as well. So we've got these World Economic Forum, UN, WHO, all this floating around, all this globalism, and we've got all the stuff we're seeing in our individual nations. How do you think it's going to play out?
What's the time frame? Give me a time frame. The next year, or 5 years, or 10 years?
Yeah, let's talk the next 12 months, and let's talk the next 5 years. So, because 12 months, most people, I think maybe just in terms of that. But then there's a broader picture. So over the next, so if we're blessed to be talking in a year's time, okay. Maybe I was going to say, where do you think we're going to be? Prison?
Oh, goodness knows where we'll be, David. I fear. I think the next year is going to be dark for us. It really is. I see no other way around it. And again, these are my worst case scenarios, and I pray to God they don't come true. I see food shortages potentially. I see the supply chains breaking down around the world. I see energy outages. Not because, think about it, if what they're trying to do ultimately is transition us off the fossil fuel grid onto a renewables grid. So that will require some disruption. There's no way we can seamlessly transition from one to the other. I fear, well, let's take it, whoever wins the elections in the States. Now, I think the action, if you want to call it that, will be primarily concentrated in the West, the Western countries of the world. At least in the short term, for reasons that I believe the Middle Eastern countries and Asian countries are, well along their way to totalitarian control anyway. It will be far easier for them to transition to some sort of global governance, if that's what you want to call it. The West is what was the problem, and especially the US. So in the short term, although over the next couple of months, David, watch the US so carefully. I fear for these elections. I fear that something awful is going to happen. I fear for an event. I don't even know if they'll happen, but let's assume that they do. I believe Trump will win. Now, that's not just because I'm hoping. I actually believe on the balance that he will win it. Now, let's just work with me. Assume I'm right. Either way, though, I think the US is poised for civil unrest. Because one way or the other, each side will contest the outcome. The extent to which that will happen is anybody's guess, but it could get very nasty. we could have military involvement in some places. Things could get, pretty scary. We've got a lot of climate events going on in the US at the same time. We've got the forest. Remember the Californian forest fires, California, Oregon.
Yep.
We've got energy shortage outages over there as well. So parts of the US are already under incredible stress. Throw in the election, throw in civil unrest, and throw in a potential event. Who knows? And you've got a very, very worrying domino effect throughout the West. Here we have Brexit, and that could be made as calamitous as they want it to be. We could have literally trade freezing up if we don't agree terms and we don't get onto the WTO. Goodness knows, I need to think this through. We can discuss this later. But I fear mass unemployment. I fear potential food shortages, potential energy outages. The vaccine may very well come. Okay, now
do you think? Yeah.
Yeah, maybe. It depends. But we'll be screaming for it, David, by then. Because they'll dangle it. Here you go. Take Billy's toxic jab. And you know what? You can go back to your football game.
Yep.
But there's no going. I'm telling you, there's no going back. They'll jab you, they'll dangle it, and then you'll need your booster because you won't be immune with just one shot.
You said that.
So it's going to be very, very difficult for us all for the next 12 months. Now, where we're all going to be, I can't say specifically, but I think the West will be gyrating.
And then if you take it that little bit longer over the next 4 or 5 years, 2025, what do you think? Where do you think we're going to be?
Unless the UN is taken out, and I don't know who or how that, I can't see a way around it. I see us on some sort of a global digital currency. How that manifests itself, I don't know, but I'm looking at China as the model. And you know that China effectively has two currencies. It has the renminbi and then the yuan. So one external one and one internal one that you can use for domestic transactions. I actually just thought today that might be the model that they start applying in the West. Yeah, so we have an external currency that we use for international trade. And the problem is that most of the corporations that survive these economic shocks are going to be global multinational corporations, the Amazons of this world, the Microsofts, the Googles, the Apples. So they will all be okay. And therefore, they will naturally be transacting in a global digital currency. Don't ask me whether there's going to be a financial collapse before that. Possibly. Highly probable, I would say. But the kind of how that's going to play out, I can't give you much more insight, David, than that, I'm afraid, at this point.
Has cash all but disappeared in Ireland?
It's well on the way. Not least because people just regard it dirty. They don't want to handle it. A lot of shops are afraid to handle it. So yes, it's happening by itself. Cash is gradually being withdrawn.
So the Chinese analogy you mentioned earlier is a really interesting one, Fiona, because I think that way totalitarian authoritarianism lies, and taking away cash from people is, if we talked about this back in January, and we have speculated by the end of this year, cash is kind of gone. You wouldn't believe it would have been inconceivable. But I go into I'm in so many stores and shops, and at the checkout, they've got this thing. We apologize. We know we don't, at this time, we don't take cash. What they mean is we're never taking cash again. I know that, they know that. But it does mean then that if everything's being, this again, financially, if currency becomes digital, those who control the digital means control what you spend, how you spend it, and where you spend it, don't they?
Yes. And that look to China, because I really believe China is the model that is being applied around the Western world right now. And we will have some sort of social credit system, which will be linked to our digital ID, which will be linked to our vaccination passport. capability, whatever they're going to do or however they implement that. And that will classify us as good citizens or not, worthy of our universal basic income or not, able to travel or not. Our smart meters could be turned off. If you're naughty, David, and you've said bad things or you've criticized somebody you shouldn't have criticized, tell you what, your energy rations will be taken away from you. So, you know.
Welcome to China.
I know. We're going to be living there. Listen, I mean, I talk to people who come from Eastern Europe on a day-to-day basis, and they tell me that they cannot believe what's happening here. They still have the memories from their parents, you know, of communism, and they see it again. They see it here
because they lived through it.
They lived through it.
Yes, that's our fundamental problem in the West. We didn't live under the jackboot of communism, and now as it's being applied to us, we don't seem to have the wherewithal to want to fight back against it. And I think that is definitely part of the problem. Well, Fiona, we've come. Unfortunately, the hour goes.
It's gone really quickly.
It has gone way too quickly. It always does. But I mean, obviously, I'd love you to come back and spend more time with us. But as you said, it's a wee bit of a horror movie we're living through, and it's just the way it is. I think one of the most important things is that the media narrative in all of this is very deceptive. It does not provide facts. It does not provide information for people to think about. And so it's really important. And that's why I'm so keen to amplify, you know, your voice and other voices to get information out so people can actually think for themselves. As I say, I take a little bit of comfort from the fact that I see younger people now beginning to think, well, this was okay back in the spring, but not happy about it now. And you know, so maybe I don't know if there's enough dissent there or not. I'm not overly optimistic, I got to say, because I think young people are being so manipulated by if they've gone to university, they're probably semi-Marxist anyway.
They are, yes.
You know, I mean, that's a problem. That's always been a problem. So many elements sort of converge, but nonetheless, I always take the view, Fiona, that the sun rises fresh every morning. Just as it goes down.
Listen, we all live in incredible times. You know, there's no doubting that. I mean, the collapse of the Roman Empire would be nothing on this collapse when it does happen.
Isn't it the Chinese who said, may you live in interesting times? And wasn't it the Chinese that actually gave us this plague, wasn't it? Funny how no one talks about that, Fiona, isn't it?
Oh, I don't know. Listen, oh goodness. But you know what? Who's pulling the strings? I hear you. That's another story we can go into.
That's another story for another day. Listen, we've taken enough of your time up. Fiona, can I thank you very much for being on the stream tonight? Such a pleasure to have you on.
You are more than welcome. And I hope to see you all back again. And thank you for your patience with me. Take care. Good night.
Thanks, everybody. Bye from me. Bye-bye.